Commander Zixathara of the Galactic Defense Coalition stood before the holographic display, her forearms crossed in obvious disdain. The blue-scaled Catherian had seen countless species join their ranks over the past 3 centuries, but none had been quite as disappointing as the humans. Their application to join the Coalition's military forces had been met with barely contained laughter throughout the command structure. "These primitive weapons," she muttered, gesturing toward the projected images of human military equipment. "Chemical propellants? Metal projectiles? They still use gunpowder-based technology while we've mastered plasma and quantum disruptors." Her second-in-command, a towering Vorthak named Grendel, nodded his massive horned head. "The humans claim their kinetic weapons have advantages, Commander. Something about reliability and effectiveness in various environments." Zixthara's laugh was a harsh chittering sound. "Reliability? Our plasma rifles can punch through battleship armor. Their little metal bullets bounce off basic energy shields." She manipulated the hologram, zooming in on various human weapons. "Look at this absurdity. They call it a rifle. It fires one projectile at a time, requires manual operation, and has an effective range of barely 2 kilometers. The command center buzzed with activity as officers from dozens of species went about their duties. The Coalition prided itself on being the most technologically advanced military force in the galaxy, with energy weapons that could level city blocks and defensive systems that could withstand asteroid impacts. Human technology seemed laughably primitive by comparison. "Sir," a young Altarian communications officer called out, "we're receiving the human military delegation. They're requesting permission to demonstrate their capabilities." "A demonstration?" Zixthara's mandibles clicked with amusement. "Very well. Schedule them for the weapons testing facility on level 7. I'm curious to see what these humans think will impress us." 3 days later, the Coalition's top military officials gathered in the testing facility. The sterile white chamber stretched for several kilometers with various targets, obstacles, and testing apparatus scattered throughout. Energy shields hummed quietly, ready to contain any weapons discharge. The human delegation consisted of only 3 individuals, a stark contrast to the usual processions of dozens that other species brought. Leading them was General Patricia Hayes, a middle-aged woman with steel-gray hair and calculating eyes. Behind her stood 2 soldiers in strange mottled uniforms that seemed to shift color depending on the viewing angle. "Honorable Coalition commanders," General Hayes began, her voice steady and confident. "We appreciate this opportunity to demonstrate human military capabilities. I'd like to introduce Sergeant Marcus Chen and Petty Officer Sarah Rodriguez, both representatives of our Special Operations Forces." Zixthara examined the 2 humans with her enhanced optical sensors. They appeared unremarkable. Bipedal, no natural armor, no visible weapons modifications. "Where are your energy rifles? Your plasma cannons?" General Hayes smiled. "We prefer a different approach. Sergeant Chen here is what we call a Navy SEAL sniper. Perhaps you could set up some targets for demonstration?" "Targets?" Grendel rumbled. "At what range? Our plasma rifles are effective up to 50 kilometers. "Let's start with something simple," Chen said, speaking for the first time. His voice was calm, almost bored. "Maybe place a target at 3 kilometers. Several Coalition officers exchanged glances. 3 kilometers was considered close-quarters combat range for their weapons. A small disc-shaped target materialized in the distance, barely visible even with enhanced optics. Chen knelt and began assembling something from a long case he'd been carrying. The weapon that emerged looked crude compared to the sleek energy rifles the Coalition used. It was clearly mechanical, with a long metal barrel and various attachments that seemed almost primitive. "That's your weapon?" Zixathara asked incredulously. "It doesn't even glow." "Glowing weapons make excellent targets," Rodriguez commented dryly. Chen settled into a prone position, the strange rifle resting on a bipod. Through the facility's observation windows, the Coalition officers watched as he made minute adjustments to various dials and mechanisms on the weapon. His breathing slowed, becoming almost imperceptible. "The target is 3 kilometers away," announced the facility's AI. "Wind speed, negligible. Atmospheric conditions, optimal." For nearly a full minute, Chen remained motionless. Then, without warning, there was a sharp crack, a sound completely unlike the humming discharge of energy weapons. The Coalition officers barely had time to register the noise before the target disk exploded in the distance. Impossible, Grendel breathed. Our sensors didn't detect any energy discharge. That's because there wasn't one, General Hayes explained. Kinetic energy, gentlemen, a precisely machined metal projectile traveling at approximately 800 meters per second. But the accuracy, Zixathera protested, at that range with such a primitive guidance system? No guidance system, Chen said, beginning to disassemble his rifle. Just physics, mathematics, and training. Rodriguez stepped forward. Perhaps you'd like to see something more challenging. The Coalition officers found themselves nodding, their scientific curiosity overriding their skepticism. Another target appeared, this time at 5 kilometers, partially concealed behind an obstacle. This time it was Rodriguez who took position. Her weapon was different, shorter with a more complex scope assembly. She spent even less time aiming than Chen had, and when the sharp crack sounded, the distant target disappeared. A ricochet shot, General Hayes explained casually. The projectile struck the obstacle at a calculated angle, redirecting to hit the target behind it. Something rather difficult to achieve with energy weapons. The demonstration continued for 2 hours. The humans showed shots at extreme ranges, through various atmospheric conditions and around obstacles that would have defeated conventional energy weapons. They demonstrated stealth positions where their weapons produced minimal signature, making the shooters nearly invisible to standard detection equipment. What disturbed the Coalition officers most was the humans' composure. They showed no strain, no indication that these were extraordinary feats. This was simply routine capability for them. As the demonstration concluded, Zixathera found herself re-evaluating her assumptions. General Hayes, these capabilities are unexpected, but surely in actual combat, against energy shields and advanced armor. Commander, General Hayes interrupted gently, with respect, your energy shields are designed to deflect energy weapons. They're not particularly effective against high-velocity kinetic projectiles. As for armor, she nodded to Chen, who produced a small metal object from his kit. Armor-piercing round, Chen explained. Depleted uranium core tungsten penetrator. It'll punch through most materials your species consider protective. For the first time since the humans had arrived, the command chamber fell completely silent. The implications were staggering. While the Coalition had focused on increasingly sophisticated energy weapons, the humans had perfected kinetic warfare to an art form. We'd be honored to have human forces join Coalition operations, Zixathera said finally, her voice lacking its earlier condescension. General Hayes smiled. We're pleased to hear that, Commander. Just one thing. Our people work best when other forces stay well out of their firing lanes. 6 months after the demonstration, the Coalition faced its first major test with human forces integrated into their ranks. The hegemony of Creks, a militant faction of insectoid warriors, had launched a surprise attack on the mining colony of Vega Prime. The planet's strategic importance couldn't be overstated. It produced 70% of the rare minerals needed for Coalition starship construction. Commander. Zixathera stood in the war room aboard the flagship Quantum Dawn, studying tactical displays with growing concern. The Creks forces had established a formidable defensive perimeter around the main mining facility, using the mountainous terrain to their advantage. Their energy shields created an overlapping network of protection that had already repelled 3 Coalition assault waves. Casualties continue to mount, reported Lieutenant Commander Veltar, his tendrils writhing with anxiety. The Creks have positioned their heavy plasma cannons in elevated positions. Our dropships can't penetrate their defensive fire, and ground assault teams can't advance through the shield network. The holographic battlefield showed a nightmare scenario. Creks forces held the high ground in a natural fortress of stone and metal, their positions seemingly impregnable. Coalition forces were pinned down in the valley below, unable to advance or effectively retreat. What about orbital bombardment? Suggested Major Krath, his reptilian features showing frustration. Impossible, Zixathera replied grimly. The mining facility contains unstable quantum cores. Any high-energy impact could trigger an explosion that would render the entire planet uninhabitable. It was then that General Hayes, monitoring from her position aboard the human ship Leviathan, made an unexpected offer through the communications array. Coalition Command. This is General Hayes. We have a team that might be able to help with your situation. Zixthera activated the communication channel. General, we appreciate the offer, but the Krex positions are heavily fortified. Even your kinetic weapons couldn't penetrate their energy shields from this distance. Ma'am, with respect, I think you might be underestimating human tactical doctrine. We'd like to deploy a small reconnaissance team to assess the situation. A reconnaissance team? Grendel's voice carried disbelief. General, our sensors show approximately 800 Krex warriors in fortified positions. What could a few humans possibly accomplish? Sometimes, Commander, the best way to solve a complex problem is to simplify it. 2 hours later, a single human dropship, barely larger than a coalition fighter craft, descended through the planet's atmosphere. Unlike the heavily armored coalition transports, this vessel seemed almost fragile, its hull covered in what appeared to be adaptive camouflage plating. From the coalition command ship, officers watched in bewilderment as the tiny craft landed not at the established coalition forward base, but in an apparently random location 15 kilometers from the combat zone. Are they lost? Asked Lieutenant Commander Veltar. Negative, came the response from the human vessel. Team is deploying according to plan. The team that emerged from the dropship consisted of only 6 individuals, led by the same Navy SEAL sniper who had demonstrated at the weapons facility. Sergeant Chen moved with fluid precision, his team spreading out in a formation that seemed to make them disappear into the rocky landscape. What the coalition officers couldn't see, but their sensors were beginning to detect, was the methodical way the human team was moving through terrain that coalition forces had deemed impassable. While energy weapons required direct line of sight, the humans seemed to treat obstacles as opportunities rather than barriers. Chen's voice crackled through the communication system 18 hours after deployment. Coalition Command, this is Viper Team. We're in position. Position for what? Zixthera demanded. You're still 12 kilometers from the nearest Krex fortification. Ma'am, distance isn't the limiting factor here. Through the command ship's sensors, the coalition officers could see heat signatures of the Krex defenders in their elevated positions. The insectoids moved with confidence, their compound eyes scanning for coalition forces in the valley below. Their energy shields hummed with power, creating an umbrella of protection that had seemed impenetrable. Coalition forces, this is Viper Team. Recommend you halt all forward movement and maintain current positions. Sergeant Chen, Grendel interrupted. With respect, we cannot win this engagement by remaining stationary. Copy that. Sir, understood. Beginning operation in 30 seconds. For a moment, nothing happened. The battlefield remained exactly as it had been for the past 24 hours. Coalition forces pinned down. Krex defenders secure in their positions, an apparent stalemate. Then, without any visible energy discharge or obvious attack, something extraordinary began to happen. One by one, Krex defenders in the elevated position simply stopped moving. The first to notice were the Krex communications specialists, who began frantically trying to contact their forward observation posts. When no responses came, they dispatched patrols to investigate. Those patrols never returned. What's happening? Zixthera demanded, staring at the tactical display where red dots representing Krex forces were beginning to disappear from the perimeter. Viper Team is doing what Viper Team does. General Hayes replied calmly from her ship. The pattern became clear as coalition sensors tracked the degradation of Krex defensive positions. Starting from the furthest observation posts and working inward, the human team was systematically eliminating key personnel with surgical precision. There were no explosions, no energy signatures, no indication of battle, just the gradual, methodical reduction of enemy capability. Impossible, Lieutenant Commander Veltar whispered. Our sensors show no weapons fire, no energy discharges. How are they? Kinetic weapons produce minimal electronic signature, General Hayes explained. A properly trained sniper can engage targets at extreme range without revealing their position. What was happening defied everything the coalition understood about warfare. In their experience, battles were contests of raw firepower, energy weapons blazing, shields crackling, explosions lighting up the battlefield. This was something entirely different. This was invisible death, precise and unstoppable. The Krex, despite their military prowess, found themselves facing an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't predict, and couldn't counter. Their energy shields, designed to stop plasma bolts and particle beams, offered no protection against kinetic projectiles that arrived without warning. Viper team to Coalition Command. Chen's voice remained perfectly calm despite the chaos he was creating. Recommend advance in 20 minutes. Enemy defensive coordination will be significantly degraded by then. But they still have energy shields, protested Major Krath. Their heavy weapons emplacements are still active. Negative, sir. Heavy weapons require operators. We're currently addressing that issue. Watching through long-range sensors, the Coalition officers saw something that would haunt their military doctrine for years to come. A single human team using primitive kinetic weapons was systematically dismantling a defensive network that had stopped 3 full-scale Coalition assaults. The beauty of it was in its simplicity. While Coalition forces had focused on overwhelming the Krek shields and energy weapons, the humans had identified the crucial weakness. Every defensive system required people to operate it. Remove the people quietly and efficiently, and the most sophisticated defenses became useless metal. This is, Grendel began, then stopped, unable to find words. This is why humans are useful allies, General Hayes said quietly. We've learned that technology is only as effective as the tactics that employ it. As the 20-minute mark approached, Coalition sensors showed a Krek's defensive network that had been reduced to perhaps 20% of its original effectiveness. The energy shields were failing as power stations went unmanned. Heavy weapons sat silent as their operators failed to check in. Coalition forces, Chen's voice came through the communications array. You are clear to advance. Recommend standard formation, minimal energy signatures. Remaining Krek's forces are likely to surrender once they realize their situation. For the first time in Coalition military history, a major enemy position was about to fall not through superior firepower, but through superior tactics applied by a 6-person team, armed with what the galaxy still considered primitive weapons. The aftermath of Vega Prime sent shockwaves through Coalition command structures across the galaxy. What should have been a costly, prolonged siege had ended in 18 hours with minimal Coalition casualties. The 6-person human team had achieved what 3 full battle groups couldn't accomplish. Admiral Thekvar of the Centaurian Defense Fleet called an emergency meeting of the Coalition War Council. Representatives from 47 species gathered in the vast circular chamber aboard the station Nexus Prime, their various forms of communication filling the air with a cacophony of clicks, whistles, and electronic tones. The tactical reports from Vega Prime are disturbing. Thekvar began, his crystalline form refracting light in nervous patterns. Not because we lost, but because of how decisively we won. The implications for our entire military doctrine are staggering. Commander Zixthara stood before the assembly, her forearms gesturing toward holographic displays showing the battle's progression. Honored council members, what we witnessed wasn't just effective tactics, it was a complete reimagining of warfare itself. The display showed the before and after positions of Krek's forces, with timeline markers indicating when each position went dark. The pattern was methodical, almost artistic in its precision. The humans eliminated 47 key personnel in 16 hours, she continued. Command staff, communications specialists, weapons operators, shield technicians. They targeted the nervous system of the enemy force rather than attempting to destroy its body. General Mordek of the Taurian Empire, a massive creature resembling a cross between a rhinoceros and a tank, snorted dismissively. Luck, he rumbled. They caught an enemy unprepared for such primitive tactics. With respect, General, Admiral Thekvar interjected, our intelligence suggests this wasn't luck. Analysis of human military history shows they've been perfecting these techniques for centuries. A new voice entered the discussion, as General Hayes materialized via holographic projection from the human delegation ship. Honored council members, I believe there may be some misunderstanding about human military capabilities. Explain, demanded Overlord Zarthol of the Hegemony, his mechanical voice carrying digital distortion. What you witnessed at Vega Prime represents our special operations doctrine, not our standard military capability. Sergeant Chen and his team are what we call force multipliers, small units designed to create effects far beyond their size would suggest. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. If what they'd seen was merely a specialized capability rather than humanity's best effort, what did that suggest about human military potential overall? General Hayes, Admiral Thekver said carefully, perhaps you could elaborate on human military organization. Certainly. Human military forces are structured in layers, each optimized for different tactical requirements. Special operations forces like SEAL teams represent our precision instruments. For conventional warfare, we employ different doctrines entirely. General Hayes manipulated her own holographic display, showing Earth military formations. A standard human infantry division numbers approximately 15,000 personnel. They're equipped with kinetic weapons ranging from individual firearms to artillery pieces, capable of engaging targets at ranges exceeding 50 kilometers. The numbers were staggering. While coalition forces typically fielded battalions of 300 to 400 highly trained specialists with advanced energy weapons, humans apparently organized armies of tens of thousands. But surely, interrupted Science Commander Velori of the Academic Union, such large numbers would be impossible to coordinate effectively. Human military doctrine emphasizes distributed command and independent unit operation, General Hayes explained. Rather than requiring constant coordination from central command, our forces are trained to operate autonomously while maintaining overall strategic objectives. Commander, Zixthara found herself reconsidering everything she thought. She knew about military organization. Coalition doctrine relied on sophisticated communication networks and centralized control. The idea of thousands of soldiers operating independently while somehow maintaining tactical coherence seemed impossible. There's more, General Hayes continued. What you witnessed at Vega Prime was surgical precision. Human military doctrine also includes what we term shock and awe, the application of overwhelming kinetic force to destroy enemy capability and morale simultaneously. She showed footage from human military exercises, artillery barrages that turned landscapes into moonscapes, coordinated airstrikes that could level city blocks, armored formations that moved with mechanical precision across battlefields. Each human infantry division includes organic artillery support capable of delivering kinetic munitions across a battlefield grid of 1,000 square kilometers. Fire missions can be coordinated and executed within minutes of target identification. The council members exchanged glances, their various forms of nonverbal communication indicating deep concern. The humans weren't just tactically innovative, they apparently possessed industrial-scale military capability that dwarfed anything the coalition had imagined. General Mordek leaned forward, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber. General Hayes, these capabilities you describe, are they theoretical or proven? General, humanity has been at war continuously for our entire recorded history. Our military doctrines have been tested and refined through thousands of conflicts across multiple continents and environments. The weight of that statement settled over the chamber like a heavy blanket. While coalition species had achieved military supremacy and settled into relatively peaceful coexistence, humanity had apparently spent millennia perfecting the art of warfare. The question, Admiral Thekvar said slowly, is not whether humanity can contribute to coalition forces. The question is whether we can afford not to have them as allies. Overlord Zarthol's mechanical voice carried new overtones of calculation. General Hayes, what would humanity require for full military integration with coalition forces? Nothing particularly complex, Overlord. We'd need tactical integration protocols, communication standards, and rules of engagement that accommodate our operational methods. And in return? In return, you'd have access to military capabilities that could revolutionize coalition defense doctrine. Human forces excel in situations where conventional energy weapons prove insufficient. Commander Zixthara thought about the Krek's defensive position that had stopped 3 coalition battle groups cold. What about larger conflicts? If we faced a major enemy offensive with thousands of ships and millions of troops? General Hayes smiled, and for the first time the expression seemed genuinely predatory. Commander, I think you might be surprised by what humanity can accomplish when we consider something a serious threat. Elaborate, demanded General Mordek. Our forces on Vega Prime represented approximately 0.001% of human military capability. We have 47 million active military personnel across all services, with industrial capacity to support extended operations across multiple star systems simultaneously. The chamber erupted in various forms of alien exclamations. The number seemed impossible, absurd. The entire coalition maintained approximately 2 million military personnel across all member species. But how? Science Commander Valori began. How do we supply such forces? How do we coordinate them? How do we maintain discipline? General Hayes anticipated the questions. Through logistic systems that have been refined over centuries of large-scale warfare, command structures that emphasize competent leadership at every level, and traditions that make military service both honored and effective. Admiral Thekvar's crystalline form flickered with rapid calculations. The resource requirements alone are sustainable because human society evolved specifically to support large-scale military operations. When your species faces existential threats for millennia, you either develop the capability to survive them, or you become extinct. The council chamber fell into contemplative silence. Each species represented had achieved technological advancement and peaceful prosperity. None had imagined that another species might have chosen a different evolutionary path, one that led to military capabilities beyond their comprehension. The vote, Admiral Thekvar announced formally, is whether to offer humanity full military partnership within the Coalition Defense Force. The result was unanimous, though many council members voted with expressions of deep uncertainty about what they were inviting into their civilization. The first joint training exercise between Coalition and human forces took place 6 months later on the desert, planet Xerion 7. What Coalition commanders expected to be a routine integration drill became a masterclass in military capabilities they hadn't known existed. Colonel James Mitchell stood before an assembled group of Coalition officers, his weathered face showing the calm confidence of someone who had spent 30 years turning theory into battlefield reality. Behind him, a company of United Earth Marines went through equipment checks with mechanical precision. Today's exercise will demonstrate human combined arms doctrine, Mitchell explained to the gathered alien officers. You'll see how our forces coordinate kinetic weapons, air support, armor, and infantry to achieve tactical objectives. Commander Zixthera observed the human preparations with growing puzzlement. The Marines moved with efficiency she had to respect, but their equipment still seemed impossibly primitive. No energy shields, no plasma weapons, no advanced defensive systems. Just metal armor, kinetic weapons, and vehicles that appeared to rely on chemical propulsion. Colonel, she asked, your troops are wearing no energy shields. How do they survive battlefield conditions? Different philosophy, Commander. We've found that mobility, concealment, and tactical awareness provide better protection than standing still behind shields. The exercise scenario was straightforward. A Coalition defensive position needed to be neutralized by attacking forces. Coalition doctrine called for a frontal assault using energy weapons to overwhelm the defenders' shields, followed by conventional troops to secure the objective. Human forces will attack from the north, announced the exercise controller. Coalition forces will observe and provide tactical assessment. What happened next challenged every assumption Coalition military leaders held about warfare. Instead of massing for a frontal assault, the human company simply disappeared. Advanced Coalition sensors detected movement in multiple directions, but couldn't establish clear contact with the attacking force. Where did they go? Demanded General Mordek, his massive form straining the observation platform. They're implementing something called fire and maneuver, Colonel Mitchell explained calmly. Rather than presenting a single target for defensive fire, they've dispersed into small units approaching from multiple directions. Coalition sensors showed confused readings. Heat signatures appeared and vanished. Motion detectors triggered randomly. Electronic surveillance systems reported contacts that disappeared before locks could be established. Impossible, muttered Science Commander Valori. Our sensors should be tracking them easily. Your sensors are designed to track energy signatures, Mitchell replied. Human equipment produces minimal electronic emissions. We've learned to operate in contested electromagnetic environments where sophisticated sensors become liabilities. The first indication of human attack capability came not from direct assault, but from 60 kilometers away. Massive kinetic rounds began falling on the defensive position with mathematical precision, each impact calculated to maximum effect. Artillery support, Mitchell explained as Coalition officers stared at the destruction in shock. Human doctrine emphasizes the use of indirect fire to suppress enemy positions before assault forces close distance. The bombardment was unlike anything coalition forces had ever experienced. Energy weapons provided clean, precise destruction, but this was something else entirely. The kinetic impacts created craters, sent debris flying in all directions, and produced shock waves that rattled equipment inside supposedly secure bunkers. But the range? Commander Zixthera protested. 60 kilometers? Our energy weapons can't maintain coherence over such distances. Kinetic rounds don't lose coherence, Mitchell replied. Physics remains consistent regardless of distance. While coalition officers tried to understand the artillery bombardment, the real assault began. Human Marines emerged from concealment at multiple points around the defensive perimeter, their approach coordinated with terrifying precision. What struck coalition observers was the fluidity of human movement. Instead of advancing in formation, the Marines flowed like water around obstacles, each individual covering their teammates while maintaining overall tactical momentum. They're not following standard assault doctrine, General Mordek observed. Because there is no standard doctrine, Mitchell explained. Human tactics emphasize adaptability. Each Marine is trained to assess situations independently and modify approach accordingly. The defending coalition forces found themselves facing an enemy that refused to behave predictably. Just as they oriented defensive fire toward one approaching group, attacks developed from entirely different directions. The humans seemed to anticipate defensive responses and counter them before they could be implemented. Suppression fire, called one of the Marine squad leaders, and suddenly the air filled with kinetic projectiles, not aimed shots, but a continuous stream of metal designed to keep defenders from effective response. Coalition energy weapons required time to charge and aim for effective shots. The human kinetic weapons produced sustained fire that forced defenders to seek cover rather than engaging targets. Their rate of fire, Science Commander Velori noted with alarm, is significantly higher than our plasma rifles. Kinetic weapons have fewer mechanical constraints, Mitchell replied. A trained Marine can maintain effective fire for extended periods without weapons overheating or power cell depletion. The human assault continued with mechanical efficiency. Artillery fire lifted just moments before assault teams reached their objectives. Air support appeared from nowhere. Aircraft that had somehow avoided coalition sensors delivered precise strikes exactly when needed. Where did those aircraft come from? Demanded Admiral Thekvar through the communication system. They've been airborne for the past 2 hours, Mitchell said. Human pilots are trained in stealth flight profiles that minimize detection signatures. Coalition defenders found their energy shields ineffective against the sustained kinetic barrage. The shields could deflect individual plasma bolts, but hundreds of metal projectiles arriving simultaneously overwhelmed the defensive matrices. Shield collapse in sectors 4 through 7, reported the exercise controller. How? Commander Zixthera demanded. Those shields should be impervious to kinetic weapons. Should be, yes, Mitchell agreed. But kinetic weapons don't behave like energy weapons. Sufficient kinetic mass delivered quickly enough will overwhelm any energy barrier. The exercise concluded with human forces occupying all defensive positions in under 40 minutes. What should have been a training scenario had become a demonstration of military capabilities that rendered coalition defensive doctrine obsolete. The casualties, General Mordek said quietly. If this had been real combat, would have been significant, Mitchell agreed soberly. Human military doctrine accepts that warfare involves casualties. We train to minimize them while maintaining mission effectiveness. Commander Zixthera found herself staring at the tactical display showing human unit positions. They had achieved complete battlefield dominance using equipment that coalition forces considered primitive. Colonel Mitchell, these capabilities your forces demonstrated, are they typical of human military performance? Mitchell considered the question carefully. Commander, what you saw today was a standard Marine company executing basic combined arms tactics. This represents routine capability, not exceptional performance. The implications hung in the air like smoke. If this was routine human capability, what did their exceptional forces look like? There's something else you should understand, Mitchell continued. Human military doctrine includes provisions for escalation. What you've seen today represents conventional infantry tactics. We also maintain specialized forces for different operational requirements, such as armored warfare using vehicles massing up to 60 tons, capable of sustained combat operations across continental distances. naval forces capable of projecting power across entire star systems, strategic weapons that can eliminate targets from anywhere in a solar system. For the first time since joining the coalition, Commander Zixithara began to understand why humanity had been at war for millennia. They hadn't just survived it, they had become masters of it. The first joint training exercise between coalition and human forces took place 6 months later on the desert, planet Xerion 7. What coalition commanders expected to be a routine integration drill became a masterclass in military capabilities they hadn't known existed. Colonel James Mitchell stood before an assembled group of coalition officers, his weathered face showing the calm confidence of someone who had spent 30 years turning theory into battlefield reality. Behind him, a company of United Earth Marines went through equipment checks with mechanical precision. Today's exercise will demonstrate human combined arms doctrine, Mitchell explained to the gathered alien officers. You'll see how our forces coordinate kinetic weapons, air support, armor, and infantry to achieve tactical objectives. Commander Zixithara observed the human preparations with growing puzzlement. The Marines moved with efficiency she had to respect, but their equipment still seemed impossibly primitive. No energy shields, no plasma weapons, no advanced defensive systems. Just metal armor, kinetic weapons, and vehicles that appeared to rely on chemical propulsion. "Colonel," she asked, "your troops are wearing no energy shields. How do they survive battlefield conditions?" "Different philosophy, Commander. We've found that mobility, concealment, and tactical awareness provide better protection than standing still behind shields." The exercise scenario was straightforward. A coalition defensive position needed to be neutralized by attacking forces. Coalition doctrine called for a frontal assault using energy weapons to overwhelm the defenders' shields, followed by conventional troops to secure the objective. "Human forces will attack from the north," announced the exercise controller. "Coalition forces will observe and provide tactical assessment." What happened next challenged every assumption coalition military leaders held about warfare. Instead of massing for a frontal assault, the human company simply disappeared. Advanced coalition sensors detected movement in multiple directions, but couldn't establish clear contact with the attacking force. "Where did they go?" demanded General Mordek, his massive form straining the observation platform. "They're implementing something called fire and maneuver," Colonel Mitchell explained calmly. "Rather than presenting a single target for defensive fire, they've dispersed into small units approaching from multiple directions." Coalition sensors showed confused readings. Heat signatures appeared and vanished. Motion detectors triggered randomly. Electronic surveillance systems reported contacts that disappeared before locks could be established. "Impossible," muttered Science Commander Velori. "Our sensors should be tracking them easily." "Your sensors are designed to track energy signatures," Mitchell replied. "Human equipment produces minimal electronic emissions. We've learned to operate in contested electromagnetic environments where sophisticated sensors become liabilities." The first indication of human attack capability came not from direct assault, but from 60 kilometers away. Massive kinetic rounds began falling on the defensive position with mathematical precision, each impact calculated to maximum effect. "Artillery support," Mitchell explained as coalition officers stared at the destruction in shock. Human doctrine emphasizes the use of indirect fire to suppress enemy positions before assault forces close distance. The bombardment was unlike anything coalition forces had ever experienced. Energy weapons provided clean, precise destruction, but this was something else entirely. The kinetic impacts created craters, sent debris flying in all directions, and produced shock waves that rattled equipment inside supposedly secure bunkers. "But the range?" Commander Zixithara protested. 60 kilometers? Our energy weapons can't maintain coherence over such distances." "Kinetic rounds don't lose coherence," Mitchell replied. "Physics remains consistent regardless of distance." While coalition officers tried to understand the artillery bombardment, the real assault began. Human Marines emerged from concealment at multiple points around the defensive perimeter, their approach coordinated with terrifying precision. What struck coalition observers was the fluidity of human movement. Instead of advancing in formation, the Marines flowed like water around obstacles, each individual covering their teammates while maintaining overall tactical momentum. They're not following standard assault doctrine, General Mordek observed. Because there is no standard doctrine, Mitchell explained. Human tactics emphasize adaptability. Each Marine is trained to assess situations independently and modify approach accordingly. The defending coalition forces found themselves facing an enemy that refused to behave predictably. Just as they oriented defensive fire toward one approaching group, attacks developed from entirely different directions. The humans seemed to anticipate defensive responses and counter them before they could be implemented. Suppression fire, called one of the Marine squad leaders, and suddenly the air filled with kinetic projectiles, not aimed shots, but a continuous stream of metal designed to keep defenders from effective response. Coalition energy weapons required time to charge and aim for effective shots. The human kinetic weapons produced sustained fire that forced defenders to seek cover rather than engaging targets. Their rate of fire, Science Commander Velori noted with alarm, is significantly higher than our plasma rifles. Kinetic weapons have fewer mechanical constraints, Mitchell replied. A trained Marine can maintain effective fire for extended periods without weapons overheating or power cell depletion. The human assault continued with mechanical efficiency. Artillery fire lifted just moments before assault teams reached their objectives. Air support appeared from nowhere. Aircraft that had somehow avoided coalition sensors delivered precise strikes exactly when needed. Where did those aircraft come from? Demanded Admiral Thekvar through the communication system. They've been airborne for the past 2 hours, Mitchell said. Human pilots are trained in stealth flight profiles that minimize detection signatures. Coalition defenders found their energy shields ineffective against the sustained kinetic barrage. The shields could deflect individual plasma bolts, but hundreds of metal projectiles arriving simultaneously overwhelmed the defensive matrices. Shield collapse in sectors 4 through 7, reported the exercise controller. How? Commander Zixthara demanded. Those shields should be impervious to kinetic weapons. Should be, yes, Mitchell agreed. But kinetic weapons don't behave like energy weapons. Sufficient kinetic mass delivered quickly enough will overwhelm any energy barrier. The exercise concluded with human forces occupying all defensive positions in under 40 minutes. What should have been a training scenario had become a demonstration of military capabilities that rendered coalition defensive doctrine obsolete. The casualties, General Mordek said quietly. If this had been real combat, would have been significant, Mitchell agreed soberly. Human military doctrine accepts that warfare involves casualties. We train to minimize them while maintaining mission effectiveness. Commander Zixthara found herself staring at the tactical display showing human unit positions. They had achieved complete battlefield dominance using equipment that coalition forces considered primitive. Colonel Mitchell, these capabilities your forces demonstrated, are they typical of human military performance? Mitchell considered the question carefully. Commander, what you saw today was a standard Marine company executing basic combined arms tactics. This represents routine capability, not exceptional performance. The implications hung in the air like smoke. If this was routine human capability, what did their exceptional forces look like? There's something else you should understand, Mitchell continued. Human military doctrine includes provisions for escalation. What you've seen today represents conventional infantry tactics. We also maintain specialized forces for different operational requirements, such as armored warfare using vehicles massing up to 60 tons, capable of sustained combat operations across continental distances. Naval forces capable of projecting power across entire star systems. Strategic weapons that can eliminate targets from anywhere in a solar system. For the first time since joining the coalition, Commander Zixthara began to understand why humanity had been at war for millennia. They hadn't just survived it, they had become masters of it. The Void Hunter fleet emerged from hyperspace exactly when projected, their massive ships blotting out stars as they assumed formation at the edge of the Centauri system. Admiral Thekvar watched from the command center of Nexus Prime, as sensors registered energy signatures unlike anything in coalition databases. Each Hunter ship stretched over 20 kilometers in length, their hulls covered with what appeared to be organic armor that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Energy readings suggested power generation capabilities that exceeded entire coalition starbases. My God, whispered Commander Zixthara, her forearms trembling as she processed the sensor data. They're not just ships, they're mobile battle stations. The Hunter fleet moved with predatory grace toward the inner system, their formation suggesting tactics refined through centuries of conquest. Scout ships ranging ahead, heavy combatants forming the main body, support vessels maintaining protective formations. Coalition forces. This is Hunter War Prime Kexthak. The communication came in perfect coalition standard, though the voice carried harmonics that suggested something fundamentally inhuman. You will surrender your industrial assets and submit to harvesting protocols. Resistance will result in complete elimination. Admiral Thekvar activated the emergency communication network, connecting coalition command centers throughout the system. All stations implement Defense Protocol 7. Evacuate civilian populations to designated safe zones. Admiral, reported the sensor operator, the Hunter fleet is accelerating toward the orbital stations. Estimated arrival in 6 hours. It was then that Admiral Chen's voice cut through the chaos with calm professionalism. Coalition Command, this is Admiral Chen aboard Prometheus. Human forces are moving to intercept. Through the long-range sensors, Admiral Thekvar watched something that defied belief. The human ships had been positioned throughout the outer system, but instead of forming traditional battle lines, they began moving independently toward optimal firing positions. Admiral Chen, there are over 200 enemy ships. You have 12 vessels. Copy that, Coalition Command. Numbers aren't the determining factor here. The first exchange came at a range that shocked Coalition observers. When the human ships opened fire, they were nearly 300,000 kilometers from the nearest Hunter vessel, a distance that made weapons completely ineffective. But the railgun projectiles reached their targets in less than 2 seconds. The lead Hunter ship, a massive dreadnought that had been advancing, with apparent invincibility, suddenly sprouted. Explosions along its hull as kinetic rounds punched through armor that had withstood the best weapons of 3 galactic civilizations. Impossible. War Prime Kexthak's communication carried new overtones of shock. Our defensive matrices show no energy weapons fire. Because there wasn't any, Admiral Chen replied calmly before switching to coalition frequencies. All human vessels engage targets of opportunity. Remember, aim for the big ones first. What followed was unlike any space battle in recorded galactic history. The Hunter fleet, accustomed to enemies who closed to energy weapon range, found themselves under bombardment from distances they considered safe. Their energy shields, designed to deflect plasma and particle beams, provided no protection against solid projectiles traveling at relativistic speeds. Their shields are failing, reported the sensor operator, disbelief evident in his voice. Multiple Hunter vessels showing critical damage. The Hunter response was swift and devastating. Energy weapons that could have destroyed coalition battle stations opened fire, sending streams of plasma across hundreds of thousands of kilometers. But the human ships weren't where the targeting systems expected them to be. Human naval doctrine emphasizes mobility over defensive strength. Admiral Chen explained through the communication link as her ship dodged energy blasts that would have vaporized a coalition vessel. We assume we'll be hit, so we train to avoid being where the enemy expects us. The human ships moved like dancers, their courses seemingly random but obviously coordinated. They fired continuously as they maneuvered, their railguns sending streams of kinetic death into the Hunter formation. War Prime, came a transmission from one of the Hunter ships. Our armor is being penetrated by primitive kinetic weapons. How is this possible? Unknown. War Prime Kexthak replied, his communication now carrying overtones that Admiral Thekvar recognized as fear. Modify formation. Close to effective engagement range. Negative, War Prime. Human vessels are maintaining distance while continuing bombardment. Admiral Thekvar watched in fascination as the tactical situation developed. The Hunters, despite their technological advantages, found themselves in an impossible position. They couldn't close to effective range because the human ships were faster and more maneuverable. They couldn't engage effectively at long range because their energy weapons lost coherence over the distances involved. But the human railguns didn't lose effectiveness with distance. If anything, the longer flight times allowed for more precise targeting calculations. Coalition Command, this is Prometheus. Admiral Chen's voice remained professionally calm despite commanding a battle against impossible odds. Recommend you begin Phase 2 operations. Phase 2? Admiral Thekvar had no idea what she meant. The really fun part, Chen replied. Human forces have been establishing firing positions throughout the system for the past week. The hunters are about to discover what concentrated kinetic bombardment looks like. Suddenly, every asteroid in the outer system seemed to come alive. Hidden installations that had been camouflaged as mining operations revealed themselves as massive railgun platforms, each one larger than most coalition ships. The bombardment that followed was beyond anything Admiral Tekvar could have imagined. Thousands of kinetic rounds converged on the hunter fleet from multiple vectors, turning space into a killing field where survival required constant movement. "Our armor is failing," transmitted a hunter vessel. "These kinetic weapons are penetrating our defensive systems." "How many platforms?" Warprime KX demanded. "Unknown, Warprime. Sensor readings suggest over 300 independent firing positions throughout the system." Admiral Chen's tactical planning became clear to Admiral Tekvar. While the hunters had expected to face a concentrated fleet defense, they were actually fighting an entire star system that had been turned into a weapon. "This is impossible," Warprime KX transmitted on open frequencies. "No civilization possesses such industrial capacity." "You haven't fought humanity before," Admiral Chen replied. "We've been preparing for threats like you for our entire species history." The hunter fleet found itself in a steadily deteriorating tactical situation. Their energy shields couldn't protect against kinetic bombardment. Their weapons couldn't engage effectively at the ranges human forces maintained. Their mobility advantages were negated by human ships that seemed to anticipate their movements. "Warprime," came another transmission from the hunter fleet. "We've lost 17 ships. Recommend tactical withdrawal." "Negative," Warprime Kexthak replied. But his communication carried new uncertainty. "Increase power to defensive systems. Close range regardless of casualties." "Sir," reported Admiral Tekvar's sensor operator, "the hunter fleet is taking massive damage. Their formation is beginning to collapse." Through the sensors, they watched something unprecedented in galactic military history. The Void Hunters, conquerors of civilizations, were being systematically destroyed by an enemy they had dismissed as primitive. "Admiral Chen," Admiral Tekvar transmitted, "your forces are achieving remarkable results. Just getting started, Admiral." The hunters made a critical error. They brought everything to one system instead of distributing their forces. Human doctrine never concentrates assets where they can be destroyed by single actions. "What do you mean?" "I mean this fleet represents most of their mobile military capability. Once we finish here, the hunter threat to the galaxy will be permanently reduced." Admiral Tekvar understood the implications. The hunters had expected to face another civilization that would concentrate its forces for a decisive battle. Instead, they had encountered an enemy that treated entire star systems as integrated weapon platforms, supported by industrial capacity they couldn't comprehend. The battle was becoming a rout. 3 hours into what should have been the conquest of the Coalition's core system, Warprime KX made a decision that no Void Hunter commander had been forced to make in over 2 centuries. He ordered a retreat. "All vessels, withdraw to jump coordinates." His transmission carried the bitter taste of defeat. "Tactical withdrawal. Immediate execution." Admiral Tekvar watched through the sensors as the mighty hunter fleet, reduced to barely 60 operational vessels, desperately attempted to reach the edge of the system where they could escape into hyperspace. Many of the surviving ships showed critical damage, their organic hulls scarred and punctured by kinetic bombardment, but Admiral Chen wasn't finished with them. "Human forces, this is Admiral Chen. Pursue and destroy. Do not allow enemy forces to regroup." The human ships, which had maintained distance throughout the engagement, suddenly accelerated to intercept the retreating hunters. Their sustained railgun fire continued to punch through hunter armor, turning what should have been an orderly withdrawal into a panicked rout. "Impossible," Warprime KX transmitted on emergency frequencies. "How are they maintaining weapons effectiveness while pursuing at maximum acceleration?" "Kinetic weapons don't require stable firing platforms," Admiral Chen replied coldly. "Human ships are designed to fight while maneuvering. It's what we call running gunfights." The pursuit continued for 18 hours as human forces systematically eliminated fleeing hunter vessels. By the time the survivors reached jump distance, fewer than 20 ships remained of the fleet that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. "Warprime," came a desperate transmission from one of the surviving vessels. "We must warn the home fleets. These humans possess military capabilities beyond our intelligence estimates." "Agreed." War Prime Kekthak replied grimly. Emergency jump to Rally Point 7. All surviving vessels will rendezvous for assessment of this unprecedented situation. As the last hunter ship disappeared into hyperspace, Admiral Tekvar found himself staring at sensor readings that documented the most decisive military victory in galactic history. A threat that had destroyed 3 major civilizations had been not just defeated, but virtually annihilated. Admiral Chen, he transmitted to the human flagship, "Your forces have achieved something remarkable. Just doing our job, Admiral. Though I should mention this was defensive operations only." Defensive, Commander Zixathara interrupted. "You destroyed over 90% of the most powerful military force in the galaxy." "Ma'am, we responded to an attack on Coalition territory. Human defensive doctrine requires eliminating threats to prevent future aggression. What you witnessed was standard defensive protocol. The implications hung in space like debris from the shattered hunter fleet. If this was standard human defensive capability, what did their offensive operations look like?" "Admiral Chen," Admiral Tekvar said carefully, "the surviving hunters will undoubtedly report to their home territories. They may return with larger forces." "Doubtful, sir. Our intelligence suggests the fleet we just destroyed represented most of their mobile military assets. The hunters expanded too quickly, concentrating their forces in conquest fleets rather than maintaining strategic reserves." Admiral Chen's tactical assessment proved prophetic. Over the following months, Coalition intelligence networks reported massive upheavals in former hunter territories. Without their primary military forces, the nomadic empire began fragmenting as conquered populations rebelled and rival factions fought for control. The hunter threat, Admiral Chen reported during a Coalition Council meeting 6 months later, no longer represents a strategic concern. Their empire is collapsing from internal pressures. Admiral Tekvar studied the intelligence reports with amazement. A galactic threat that had existed for millennia had been eliminated in a single engagement by human forces that considered it routine defensive action. Admiral Chen, on behalf of the Coalition, "I want to express our gratitude for human military assistance." "Appreciate that, Admiral, but I think there might be some misunderstanding about the relationship we're establishing." "Explain." "Human forces didn't save the Coalition, Admiral. We joined it. There's a significant difference in terms of mutual obligations and strategic planning." Commander Zixathara leaned forward, her forearms showing interest rather than the fear they once displayed around humans. "What kind of strategic planning?" "The kind that ensures threats like the hunters never achieve galactic dominance again," Admiral Chen replied. "Human military doctrine includes provisions for proactive threat elimination." "Proactive?" "Sir, the hunters weren't the only aggressive expansionist empire in the galaxy. Our intelligence has identified several developing threats that could achieve hunter-level capabilities within a few centuries." Admiral Tekvar felt a chill that had nothing to do with station temperature. "You're suggesting preemptive action?" "I'm suggesting strategic planning that addresses threats before they become existential crises. The Coalition has spent centuries reacting to aggression rather than preventing it." General Hayes, joining the conversation via holographic link, added context that made the implications clear. Human military history teaches that defensive actions, while necessary, are insufficient for long-term security. True peace requires making aggression unprofitable for potential enemies. "And how?" asked Science Commander Velori. "Do you propose to achieve that?" "Through demonstrated capability and strategic positioning," Admiral Chen replied. "When potential aggressors understand that attacks will result in their complete destruction, they tend to choose peaceful alternatives." Admiral Tekvar realized he was witnessing the birth of a new galactic order. For centuries, the Coalition had maintained peace through defensive strength and diplomatic negotiation. Humanity was proposing something different: peace through overwhelming military superiority and the will to use it. "The galaxy," he said slowly, "is about to become a much more peaceful place." "Yes, sir," Admiral Chen agreed, "because it's about to become much more dangerous for anyone who threatens that peace." Commander Zixathara, who had initially dismissed human weapons as primitive, now understood the true nature of what the Coalition had gained. Not just allies, but protectors who possessed both the capability and the mentality to eliminate threats before they became existential crises. "One question," she said. "The forces you deployed against the hunters, What percentage of human military capability did they represent? Admiral Chen considered the question carefully. Approximately 15% of our current fleet strength. We maintain strategic reserves for simultaneous operations across multiple star systems. The silence that followed was profound. The coalition had just witnessed what they considered an impossible military victory, achieved by a force that represented a fraction of humanity's actual capabilities. I think, Admiral Tekvar said finally, the galaxy just became a much safer place for peaceful civilizations. That's the idea, sir, Admiral Chen replied. Human military doctrine has always focused on protecting those who can't protect themselves. The coalition gives us the opportunity to apply that philosophy on a galactic scale. As the meeting concluded, Admiral Tekvar reflected on how completely human integration had changed everything. A year earlier, coalition forces had laughed at primitive kinetic weapons. Now those same weapons had eliminated the galaxy's greatest threat and established humanity as the dominant military force in known space. The irony wasn't lost on him. In seeking to add human capabilities to their own forces, the coalition had actually joined humanity's vision of galactic security. And for the first time in centuries, that galaxy felt truly secure.